requisitions.
I'm fine with them.
And yes?
Yes.
And I have two add-on resolutions. I have a resolution to hire Jennifer Gabbard and Riley Fusion as emergency communications operators within emergency services.
So moved?
Yes.
Yes.
That's all that I have add-ons.
Okay. And we start this morning with Mr. Post. Is
Dave
Mr.
Mick.
Tennyson gonna be here?
Dave Mick.
Oh, you've got Dave
Dave
Mick, yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I didn't realize that.
What's that?
I said I didn't realize Dave was coming.
Okay, so
Instead
we're
of
gonna
you.
start with you.
They may be on their way, but,
Is Mr. Tennyson coming?
I think they were planning on coming.
Well, what do you wanna do?
Having to get kicked off here.
Okay, well, go ahead and kick it off.
Good morning. You all may recall, last summer, we met with Mercy Health and we had a variance request hearing. And as part of that conversation, you might also remember there was a resident from Wilson Avenue, Micah Frank. And he had expressed some concern about, traffic on Wilson Avenue. This is on the south side of the proposed Mercy Health campus. Of course, Kings Island Drive, Columbia, east and west, and Kings Mills Road on the north side. On the south side, Wilson Avenue. And Wilson Avenue is a 19-foot wide road, residents on the south side, and as part of that conversation, Mr. Franks mentioned some concern about drainage and concern about access for the residents as far as pedestrian access. And this board, in speaking with, on behalf of Mr. Frank, Mercy Health agreed to improve Wilson Avenue by grading an 18-foot shoulder on the north side and provide a 2-foot wide berm. So no sidewalk was mentioned there. And since, now that they've proceeded further with planning and design, they're running up against, some design problems in their minds as far as potential for utility relocates and maybe the potential to redo grading twice when they develop that south part. What you see under construction now, that Mercy Health plans to develop the north 2/3 of the property, and then they have a second phase coming in along the north side of Wilson Avenue that they do not have a developer in mind just yet. They have a concept, but they don't know when they might proceed with that south section. So, in speaking with Mercy Health, we have a compromise in mind with them in that they would provide an area for pedestrian traffic, perform no grading yet on Wilson Avenue until that second phase was developed or some time frame. We mentioned 5 years. If that south development did not proceed within that time frame, then we'd bond it. We'd commit Mercy Health to making those improvements then. So the question is, would that be acceptable to this board? And if so, a question for Bruce would be, would that require another public hearing if we were to move forward with that? Any questions?
I do. What, if anything, did the decision state relating to the subject matter?
The resolution indicated that Mercy Health would improve Wilson Avenue, that Dan McCarthy with Mercy Health agreed to that when the board mentioned their desire. There was not a time frame specified.
And there was no explanation or definition of what improved Wilson Avenue constitutes?
Yeah, it was grading for an 18-foot wide shoulder and a 2-foot wide gravelled area adjacent to the pavement.
Well, if your question is, do they need to it's not really reopen the hearing because decision's been made. Does Mercy Health need to reapply to deviate from that? I don't think so, because I'm not hearing anything that says that the compromise deviates from what the resolution decision stated.
And the biggest problem with them not performing now is twofold. They don't really need, they're not developing anywhere close to that right now, so they don't necessarily see a need. Or you said something about they'd have to do it twice? What?
Well, that's their contention. You know, it's a little, we don't have surveying there yet. They did not ask their design consultant to provide any surveying for that area, so it's, you know, we're not 100% certain, but their thought is they don't know exactly how they're going to develop that portion nearest to Wilson Avenue. And if they were to perform grading now, then they may have to redo some of that grading later. And the other part of that I need to mention is there, and I don't know if this came out in a public hearing with the city of Mason, part of their process, but they had relayed resident concerns about that tree screening that's on the north side of Wilson Avenue. And to do this work, they would have to remove that tree screening now. Ordinarily, Mason would have some landscaping and screening standards, so they're not ready yet to build that landscape mound and everything
I
else that
thought
they
we were
would
trying
need.
to keep that tree line.
Well, yeah, and I know that was the desire of the residents, but to complete these improvements on Wilson Avenue, you can't keep it. You're going to be removing that entire screening for that to be accomplished. And what we're talking about as far as this compromise solution in the interim is grading an area behind this tree screening that would keep an open pedestrian access.
Okay, so when this question came up, and some people came from the neighborhood to the south, their concern was about the narrowness of the road or about the fact that pedestrian people on the road would be in some sort of danger. Is that?
Yeah, and I don't know that I recalled that coming up. You know, I know the narrowness of the road was part of our concern. And Micah Frank did mention his desire to be able to walk along Wilson Avenue. Neil Kurt, are you remembering something?
I thought that
anymore?
that's what their concern
That's right,
was.
that was the concern, that they could walk safely along
Right.
Wilson, but without having to walk in, in the path of traffic.
Right. Now, does what we're suggesting here solve that problem?
It does. They would also, I don't know how heavily used this would be, but at least there would be an area designated for pedestrian traffic. Now, it would just be a
I mean, what
lawn.
does that mean, an area designated for pedestrian?
Yeah.
A path or something, there's just a big enough berm?
Yeah, no, it would be removed from the roadway. So you would, right now you have the north edge of pavement of Wilson Avenue, then you have a steep roadside ditch in some areas. Then you have that, the treed area, the brush area that provides some screening. And what we would be considering is bush hogging a path on the backside of that. So, you know, we may be anywhere from 15 to 20 feet removed from the roadway, and then that's where the pedestrian traffic would occur.
Now, how?
It's just kind of a natural lawn, mowed area that's maintained.
And this, what is the hospital's intent for using this road? Do they think this, I thought the major egress and ingress to their hospital is not gonna be off of this road.
No, but there will be some increased traffic associated with the hospital. Now, there's also quite a bit of school traffic right now, including bus traffic. But they have 2 access points proposed on Columbia, and 1 right in, right out on Kings Mills Road, and 2 access points on Kings Island Drive.
Right.
No access points on Wilson.
Right, so that's the major thing. So does the school use this road for bus traffic? Regular
Yeah,
bus traffic?
they do.
I mean,
I
like
mean, I
more
don't-
than just going down to the people that might be living in the area? they're actually shunning buses down Wilson as a regular way to get there as opposed to going around Kings Mills and going in a more direct route?
Well, I've seen some bus traffic on the traffic counts. I don't know. You guys, have you seen that?
Yeah, I don't know the actual counts for school buses or anything like that, but I think we should, I think they do use it, so I think that's fair to say that that's a concern, no
All right,
doubt.
so now, do the neighbors, is what's driving this, the neighbors, issue, or are we driving this for other reasons? Is the engineering office want to do this improvement, regardless of what the neighbors feel about it?
That was what was discussed, during the public hearing, when the neighbors, came. Micah Franks, I think, was the spokesperson, and that was a concern. And so, from that, at the access variance hearing, that was determined that, grading improvement for pedestrians would occur as part of the hospital improvements. And, at that time, there wasn't any phasing of the hospital improvements contemplated. It was just, when the hospital's built, these improvements, including the pedestrian improvement along Wilson, will be completed. So then when we heard from the hospital, hey, that's part of phase 2, so we're not gonna do these improvements now, that's where we were like, oh, wait a minute. 'Cause
Yeah.
we feel like these improvements need to occur as part of the hospital improvement, and those people may be a little bit, they may think, wait a minute, why weren't these improvements done? So that's where we got our heads together with Mercy to say, well, maybe there's something that we can do on the interim to satisfy the concern.
And that's what we don't have. I have Neil's memo, but in nowhere does the memo tell me what your solution is that you've come forward. So it'd be really helpful if you. Yeah, like, I just don't understand what we're talking about. So if you could explain what now, there was an agreement made to do this. They're now wanting to push off the agreement they made to phase 2. And instead of making them do it now because of some perceived or chance they have to regrade again, which I'm not sure bothers me that much, to be quite honest with you, since I don't know when phase 2 is going to be done. I'd like to know, what is the solution that they and you are proffering up that would perhaps satisfy the constituencies that we were trying to get the parties to deal with?
Right, yeah, and I think Neil's provided some pictures just here this morning, but also I think the key was too, is that, the screening, like Dave mentioned, because Mercy was reluctant to do anything with the grading for the pedestrian now.
Because they didn't want to get rid of the screen, so this,
Because that's not gonna be addressed until phase 2 of the development.
yeah, I
So-
hear you.
So then we're trying to say, okay, how can we get something to accomplish the pedestrians without, jeopardizing the screening, which those same folks also want.
Yeah,
And then, during phase 2, through the city of Mason, that's when, if any of that screening's taken out, then they would have to supplement with more landscaping.
got it.
Well, have we informed the neighbors? Because I remember that they were concerned about the traffic, they were concerned about pedestrian walking, et cetera, and making provision for that. And they were also concerned about not seeing the hospital and having proper screening. And I wonder if describing to them what we're talking about here would be helpful. And that's why I asked the question of whether a lot of this was being driven by them as opposed to independently by us. Because I wonder if they're gonna have exactly the same opinion if they know that all of this current screening is gonna go away. And I doubt that they're gonna have a lot of screening for a long time. Probably with some of their lifetimes, they're not gonna have the kind of screening they've got now. So I wonder if we wanna tell them that, and then I'm asking you all, if they change their opinion, does that change our opinion on what to do? So here's my thing. If there's a way to try to accomplish some of what they're saying and not take away the current screening, it's my question. They might prefer that course, and does that influence your recommendation on how to proceed?
First of all, we have not talked to any resident about our ideas. I mean, you're the first to hear. Second, we feel like we're trying to, what's driving this is the access management variance that we ran. And that was a condition, and we feel that we're trying to maintain that. We feel that this interim approach is the best way to keep that screening. And I've got some pictures. Do you have the?
Yeah, they're up there if you want to put them on the screen.
All right.
Yeah, because on the west side of Wilson that's like a whole little grove of trees. You're not, just because you cut back 50 feet of trees, that does nothing. It's all about the east side of Wilson.
Just put these two against. Okay.
Tell team.
Back up a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
What's it?
How heavy rain is it?
Now?
Yeah.
It's just starting to back up. I didn't really go into it.
Uh-oh. Want to recess for a minute?
All right, we'll recess for just a second. There's a small minor convertible emergency.
Oh, you got that? Sorry.
Dan McCarthy.
We had a bit of a storm last week. We had lightning hit our building
Oh, really?
and knocked our computers out and our cameras out and our alarm system out. So we're gradually getting back into back on our system, but
Is it real bad?
it was a.
Not yet,
really
but it
shook
might
the
be in a
building.
minute.
Things are looking up.
That's good.
We've been helping out Claremont County with clearing debris down in the Goshen area. They've had a lot of trees down. We were down that way. I have family lives in Goshen, so we went down and saw them Sunday, and it was very mindful. It reminded me of the tornado that hit us back in 1974. I lived in the tornado that hit Sharonville back in '74. Very similar. A lot of damage. So, but we're back out there today helping them remove trees. We've got the grapple, a truck with a grapple on it, and you can pick up large limbs of about a 2-foot diameter tree and put it in a trailer. So we're hauling that out for them. So.
Where do you take that?
Well, right now, they've got a area, I don't know if you're familiar with Goshen, but they have, on 28 at Goshen Road, there's a McDonald's restaurant on the northwest corner. On the southwest corner, there's an open area. There's a ball field next door, and they've been dumping a lot of debris there, and I don't know where they're gonna haul it off.
Just some mulching company will probably take it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. That was, I'm glad no one was hurt in that, but that was pretty destructive.
Do we need to re-adjourn or something like that?
Yeah.
Or do we have to take a motion for that?
I have your,
We're
I
back
have you
on?
back on.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Well,
we've reconvened the meeting.
Here's Wilson Avenue, is where it ties in with Kings Island Drive. And we're talking about, so I have a, doesn't work. Well, here's the Mercy Hospital site. And so we were looking at, eventually there'll be an 18-foot berm along this side of Wilson Avenue, along Wilson Avenue. And so right now, there's a ditch that runs right alongside the pavement. There's really no place to put in a berm right now, so we would have to move the ditch over, and that was the plan, was to move this over. Right now, there's a swale that runs back behind, well in the property, and we helped the township construct that back, maybe 10 or so years ago with an easement from, at that time, Great American Insurance. So but we're not ready to move that over yet. So then we go, this is continuing east, and this is Columbia Road right here. So right now, this is First Street and a little Mapledale subdivision. It's an old subdivision, and there's a driveway that used to run back to the old Football Hall of Fame football field back in here. So, but this is an access with a gate. It's a lock gate right now. So this ditch runs alongside here, and you'll see that there's a lot of brush, a lot of honeysuckle and whatnot that's grown up along here, and they've shown, the survey has picked out some trees that run alongside that. They're not really large, but something that kind of confines where the drainage goes. There really isn't any place to put in a walk along there right now, and this is a photo looking from that driveway that I just mentioned that goes back to the old Football Hall of Fame, college football field there. And this is looking east towards Columbia Road, and you can see the little swale that runs alongside.
I thought most of those trees are gone.
No, that's just honeysuckle and
That previous picture
whatnot.
looked like on the east side of the road that most of the trees were gone.
No. Then now, behind that, there's a utility easement. Duke Energy has a,
Can you go back to the previous picture?
sure.
Yeah, see what I'm talking about? It looks like,
Well, this picture was taken in the winter, so you're not going to see, a lot of the leaves on the trees, right?
okay, so they're still there. Because I was going to go down making them do the screening now.
Yeah.
Regardless, are they having to do a mound?
No, not for our project right now. Now, here's a power line, and you'll see on a picture, there are a lot of lines on these. And it's not a transmission line, it's it's distribution lines, but there's a lot of power that runs through this, and it runs down the hill and crosses over the river where our King Avenue Bridge is. We're working with Duke to get that relocated. So this is an important line, is the point that I'm making. So and there isn't any vegetation under that. So the vegetation's on each side of that line. So if you remove what's along here, then it does kind of open up. There is some vegetation on the property, but it really does open it up to view from residents on Wilson.
So you're talking about basically trimming back those trees there?
Right, just mowing back getting a bushwhacker and basically cutting that all back, and then you'll see a fence along here. This is a construction fence that Danis, the contractor for the hospitals, put up, outlining the limits of their property. So, keep people out. But I think there's enough room to trim all that brush back and get a path in really alongside that fence.
And how do you define a path? You'll put down some gravel or do nothing?
We were looking at it. We're thinking of a 4-foot, maybe it doesn't even need to be a gravel. It might be just a lawn, a treated lawn. It's just something
But then
that's fairly
does that become
level.
our responsibility of cutting that? I guess it
No.
already is, the township's?
No, well, I mean, a township, but the hospital seems to be agreeable to doing that, as something that they're not tearing out all that, doing all that grading and then possibly redoing it later on. To them, that's a huge expense. Something like this would be minimal compared to that. So they do seem to be agreeable to that. Wasn't that the impression? That was the impression I got in their email.
Yeah, Neil, I was under the same impression reading their email today. They seemed agreeable to that. And we specifically mentioned maintenance. I'll mention a couple other things while we're discussing this. One is the hospital's assumption that they were going to make these improvements in the second phase, and that was coordinated. The phasing and the development itself was coordinated through the city of Mason. Ordinarily, the city of Mason would have standards as far as, I'm not intimately familiar with their regulations, but my impression is they have standards with the landscaping, mounding, and so forth, and that would all be part of their review of the site plan in the second phase. So the hospital is really not prepared now from a procedural standpoint, going through Mason's process, their plan review. All that would have to be done, to get the permanent landscaping, screening, mounding, and all that in. And they don't have a development yet, development plan. So that's part of the complication now with the timing. I'll mention too, the other part is Deerfield Township they preferred sidewalk and the full improvements now. So we're working with them too, just kind of explaining where we are in the process, and that's not, as far as sidewalk goes along Wilson, that was never part of our conversation with them. That's not something we can add to this, now, but I thought it's worth mentioning their thoughts, on the improvements.
And kind of piggybacking on that too, the communication, we talked to Deerfield Township yesterday, and they had provided us with, some communication email chain that had occurred, between, Eric Reiners from Deerfield Township as well as Eric Hansen, the city manager at Mason, and then where the township had voiced their concern about, hey, we'd like to have, a permanent sidewalk, and this was back at the end of last year, and I believe Eric Hansen from the city said, oh yeah, that's something that we could work towards, as part of the phase 2 PUD site plan, like Dave mentioned. So, that's why we're looking at, that's nothing that, this Board of Commissioners contemplated during the access variance hearing. It's just the residents that came up and said, hey, we're concerned about having a place to walk. So that's why we're coming back with hopefully an interim solution until the hospital can, do their phase 2 site plan through the city of Mason.
Yeah, I've got no problem with trying to do something in the interim, simply because I understand from their perspective, if there was no plan, they don't even know what's going in there, and we start telling them, go mound something or go put in a bunch of permanent evergreens right now, we don't know. But then conversely, the only reason we'd have to put the evergreens in is if we cut back that entire row of trees right away, which only happens if we make the improvements immediately as opposed to deferring it. So is this an interim measure of cutting back the trees basically to the fence line and then mowing that? I mean, you're not talking about putting any gravel in, so it's just a walkable grass along the road?
That's what we're thinking right now. Yeah, we think that, I'm not sure if gravel, there may be some problems. There would be a maintenance problem with gravel. I think mowing that would be.
You don't normally put gravel in your ditches, do you?
No.
Is there something wrong with allowing them not to make these improvements until they actually have this subsequent phase where they develop this area?
Well, we didn't feel that was part of the conditions of their variance. I mean, we thought it was understanding that they would do this work all in one phase. We never heard about a phase two.
What does
So,
that mean, Bruce? When we gave the variance, does it mean that we can't do this in a future development?
But we don't really have a time frame in there. We're just telling them they've got to do it, but there's no performance metric. So how do we say you got to do it now as opposed to 3 years from now?
The decision actually just specifies that the developer will enter into a development agreement that's acceptable to the county engineer and the Board of Commissioners. It references testimony where Dan McCarthy, and thank you for providing this to me, Tina, made an agreement to provide a graded shoulder on the development of Wilson Avenue consistent with the Warren County Thoroughfare Plan, but we didn't make that a per se condition. We just made it a condition in the decision that they would enter into a development agreement and memorialize the scope of the improvements that are to be designed.
So all they're saying is, we're gonna work it out with the engineer's office. They didn't work it out with us. They just agreed, we're gonna do something that's agreeable to the engineer's office.
And they're saying that they want to do it in a future, when future development happens in that area, correct?
Well, the development agreement's being negotiated. We have been back and forth. The most recent version is on my desk as of the end of last week and will be reviewed today. And the county engineer would need to make sure that the testimony that's recited in the variance decision is complied with. And again, that's just the graded shoulder, no timing, no width, no particulars, no specifics. But it gives him Neil some discretion to decide what that should have in it. Hopefully the parties can agree to that.
Yeah, because it's almost like we don't have any juice to make them do it immediately, because that's not what it says it has to do. It says they're going to enter into an agreement with the engineer's office, mutually agreeable.
Yes.
Which is incredibly vague. That
Yes.
doesn't mean, oh, we're gonna force you to do this right now. Well, we haven't entered into an agreement.
Correct.
So, my question again is, the hospital wants to do this at a future time, this 18-foot grade berm and stuff. And so my question is it possible for us to allow that? But then I go back, my preceding question was, this is all predicated on reading your memo, okay, and remembering what the neighbors said. And they're making the assumption that the current screening is more important to these people than improving that area to have some walkability. And so and I don't know whether that's true or not, whether that's really what the neighbors want. And then I don't know how much of this is being driven by the neighbors' interest in having a walkable area, and whether or not, because of the way this is developing, whether that's even needed until the future development. So then I go back to the question of, is it helpful to maybe get the neighbors' input at this point as to their view of the screening and what we're proposing. In other words, your proposal, should we talk to them about that and say, look, you know, this is what we're currently thinking about doing. We were gonna enter into an agreement, now we're talking about doing that, and this is our proposal from the engineer's office. But here are the alternatives. I mean, is it worthwhile to talk to the neighbors about that?
I would almost think that that's more, I mean, we've got to make that decision based on the context of the agreement.
Well, I'm just asking whether we want the advice of the neighbors as to.
But then that just opens up, the you know, are they speaking with one voice? Some people,
Yeah.
no, I want the screening, no, some people, I think that's,
Just-
but again, we don't have the power to make them do it right now to begin with. It sounds like from Bruce, we can't
Well-
tell them to go do it immediately.
It sounds to me, though, that the engineer's office believes, and I don't want to speak for you, Neil, but believes that waiting to a now identified phase 2 is not keeping in the spirit of what was discussed, and that's the way I feel about it. The
Exactly.
spirit of the discussion was that we wanted to be able to preserve the residents' ability to be able to walk as they had been doing as traffic increases. And while I think it's perfectly appropriate to consider all of these other variables, like the rationale behind a second phase, the fact that the city of Mason and Deerfield Township are continuing, I mean, my guess is that the improvements there will ultimately be of a very high quality, of which the residents will be very happy. But in the meantime, to me, the spirit of the conversation was that we would continue to make this passable and safe for the residents who lived in the community. And I'm hearing from you that what they have proposed that doesn't address the next, I don't know, year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, is not in keeping in the spirit of the discussion or the further negotiations you all had.
That's exactly right. And when we told them, well, this is news to us, and they go, well, we told it would be phased, but then they backed off on that. They said, well, we didn't say it was going to be phased. And I think that's why they're agreeable to an interim
And your
phase to this.
suggestion of this interim, you think it's doable, you think the hospital has agreed to it, they will maintain it, but you don't necessarily know if it's acceptable to the residents who brought this forward.
Or that it's in line with the variance that we gave them as part of.
But then why are we trying to, if you think it's violating the spirit of the agreement and you don't like it, why don't we just make them do it then?
Because I don't, it does seem a bit unfair, I guess, that they would have to possibly do this twice. I mean, I recognize they're making a lot of improvements on our county roads, as you know, that's all being done in the spirit of the agreement. So, you know, they're making improvements to Kings Mills Road, that other improvements to Kings Island Drive, to Columbia Road, that probably go above and beyond what they would normally have to do. So keeping that in mind, I don't necessarily want them to spend a lot of money on something that can be constructed later on. So, you know, it's a fairness, really more of a fairness issue than anything. So we're keeping in mind their costs too.
And so I guess I just want to really understand your concern even in proffering up the solution. Are you suggesting then that in agreeing to this, what I would view as a temporary stopgap measure on the way to what was agreed to, you're suggesting that that temporary stopgap measure has to conform to what was agreed to in order for it to be done?
Right. We feel that we're at least getting some pedestrian access through there and keeping the screening. I mean, that was the original intent of what we were proposing
Right.
originally. So we can keep that. It's not ideal, but that is in keeping in the spirit of that variance.
I don't want to belabor this, but I feel like it's important, maybe to spend another minute, if we have another couple minutes, on just what the solution is. So looking at this photograph here, what we're looking at is actually not a path immediately adjacent to the road. It's going to be removed, as what's shown in this photograph, and I've got a couple other images here to share. So we would cut back the brush here. There would be at least a good 10-foot separation between the pedestrian area and the edge of pavement. But then we would also, as we working our way west towards Kings Island Drive, we would be locating the path behind the existing tree screening area. So there are 2 power pole lines, and this existing fence is located about 20 feet north of Wilson Avenue. So that path would be, in this area, this is about midway, just a little bit west of that field drive on Wilson. This path would be about 20 foot removed from Wilson Avenue roadway. Again, continuing west along this area under the power pole lines, or near it, you may be just a little bit south of that power pole line with a little bit of clearing on the back side. Then finally, when you would tie in, there's going to be a 10-foot wide bike path along Kings Island Drive, the east side along the hospital frontage. And this area is Wilson Avenue, just approaching the intersection of Kings Island Drive. Here we would put an asphalt path, again separated from the roadway for the first couple hundred feet until we got to First Avenue, that would then empty out of that lawn area. So you'd have the lawn area, then to the right or the south side of the lawn area, you'd have the tree screening, then the roadside ditch, then Wilson Avenue. And what we talked about in the hearing last summer was no sidewalk, a graded shoulder immediately adjacent to Wilson Avenue. So you could make the case that this is a safer alternative than what we discussed last summer.
I guess it's unclear to me how, I don't think we're proffering up a solution to the agreement. It feels to me like we're proffering up an interim step, and that I'm less concerned, unless, Bruce, you tell me I need to be concerned about this, but I'm less concerned about whether or not the interim step conforms with the agreement, because ultimately what I care about is what is actually developed there, and in keeping with the spirit, because those things are evolving. You know, if you tell me, if the engineer's office tells me that this will be a safe alternative that they're willing to do and willing to maintain, that is, you know, gets us to the next step, then I'm satisfied with that. I don't know why this, what I would call interim step to get to the final solution, needs to conform, because what we care about is the final product, no? I mean, Bruce, what am I missing?
Yeah, keep in mind that the development agreement will come back before you to vote on, and today we're just looking for some direction to address that issue in the development agreement.
Well, I guess I would just say then, I'm open to a reasonable interim step that satisfies the engineer's office and the residents, but that ultimately I care about what is developed there in perpetuity. That's what I care about.
I think this has very little to do with us. Our agreement says you're to enter into a mutually agreeable agreement. So if during this deliberation time, you guys are figuring out, well, wait a second, this actually works a little bit better. That's exactly what's supposed to be happening right now.
And I totally appreciate the reason you're here, is because you're gonna come back here looking for approval, and you need to hear from us that we're okay with a reasonable kind of intermediary step.
And we want to make sure that we don't have another public hearing process that we have to go through to get to that point, so.
Well, let me ask Bruce this question. Bruce, are we really, is the commission part of this process? Or is it really just the engineer's office that needs to reach an agreement with them?
You'll need to sign the development agreement.
All we've done is state an ultimate goal that we want to have accomplished, and that was really the instruction, but the agreement has to be reached between the engineer's office and the developer. And you've heard from the neighbors their concerns about walkability and sight and stuff like that. And I am sensitive and agree with your feeling about not making this developer do this all over again and twice. So I don't know that you have to come to us to ask for permission to reach an interim agreement with them. I guess that's my feeling about it.
Well, eventually you are going to sign the agreement. We didn't want to have a surprise for you, that's all. That's,
Yeah.
we're-
I
Okay.
totally appreciate that.
Well, and just make sure that we wouldn't have to go back to the public hearing. That was the other thing,
I don't
since
think
we,
we're gonna have to go back to a public hearing.
right. Just-
No.
That was we just wanted to make sure we weren't out of line doing something without involving you. We wanted to involve the board.
And I appreciate you coming back, because to me, the spirit of the conversation needs to be captured in the intervening step to get to the final product.
Okay.
Thank you.
Neil, how's our bridge construction coming on southbound 71?
The southbound ramp, it's coming along. They've got the deck, concrete deck in place. I think we'll definitely have it open by the end of October.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. It's it'll be a huge improvement. So, yeah, it's coming along nicely. King Avenue Bridge, that's coming along. I don't know if you've been down there, but we've got the fill place for the abutment on the Deerfield Township side. When you come down the hairpin turn, you're going through a canyon, you'll see a huge fill on your left and a hillside on your right. But
What are we doing on Sociable Foster, going down to the,
we're replacing culverts. We're gonna pave, Sociable Foster Road. We like it when we do projects like that, we like to have the culverts replaced, because we don't wanna have to tear it up, in a couple of years. So we try to get all that done. So we're doing 2 culverts, one between Landon Drive and Western Road, and I think another one just east of Western Road. So that'll be hopefully done by tomorrow, and then we'll be paving. We'll have all of our culverts replaced, and we'll finish out our resurfacing program.
very good, thanks, fellas.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay, so now we have a public hearing for our 2023 tax budget.
I know how he feels.
What's that? Good morning, Commissioners. We are seeking 2 things for today. We have the 2023 tax budget before you. I think I've set those in front of you for you to review. And then secondarily, once that's approval of the resolution that I think either Tina's put in front or we'll state out, we do want to spend some time regarding direction from the board relative to thoughts on kind of retention or recruitment of staff that we have, currently have issues with, like a lot of other folks. Specifically for the tax budget, just for those that are watching, it's really just to certify the funds, make sure they're sufficient for planned expenditures going into 2023. The 2023 tax budget for the general fund is $89,728,000. That is 8.83 over the 2020%, sorry, over 2022's annual appropriation. You have a way that it divides itself out. Like usual, you have almost 56% is in public safety, roughly 40% in general operations, nearly 4% in social service, and about 1% in miscellaneous and debt, even though the debt will be moved off after this year. For the tax budget, we do always put the full weight of children's services into that. We have also continued DTAC, more of the treasurer and the prosecutor's office, because we have a low DTAC, is put onto the general fund. The 911 debt is ending. However, when Paul Kendall and Telecom was in front of you, you've reallocated that money for the radio systems that they came in displayed for that. And then, as you probably are aware, we're under a facility study currently, and we'll get that hopefully by the end of the backside of this year. And so, we'll have more details relative to that. As far as the current overview, obviously we have June wrapped up as far as where we are for 2022. It's going to look a little bit different. I think in a lot of the emails that I've forwarded, I've always kind of put that in there that it looks a little bit different because of the tax holiday. So there's about $24 million that will not be received for the county for 2022. Obviously, the fact that we're through June, we would be 50% in on both revenues and expenditures. Sales tax continues to remain extremely strong. We're up 8.15% over this time last year, and then going into August, which actually is the May collection, is forecasted with auto and non-auto to be 7.6. So sales tax continues to remain very strong. From a revenues and expenditures, as I said, would be about 50%. We would be at 50% through June. Revenue at this stage of anticipated, we're sitting at 62%. Again, I just want to throw the caveat in there is that 62% of what was anticipated, and the anticipated was dropped by $24 million because of the tax holiday. We'd be the same for expenditures. We'd be at 50%. We are at 44%. So as usual, we're bringing in more than is anticipated, and we're spending less than is budgeted. Investment income, we're on pace to be slightly less than what we received in 2021. I think the last time that Treasurer Wright sent you an email, he discussed a little bit of the reason for that lag, and that is really because of the maturities and trying to take advantage of the increasing interest rates. The last thing that he did say was that 35% of that portfolio will mature within the next 12 months, so he hopes to capitalize on that once those mature and he's able to reallocate. In 2022, obviously, through the mid-year, we've spent monies relative to ARPA, things that we have from COVID expenses and testing that relates to our own expenses, things that you did with the school districts. We used some of those dollars for the corrections staff, nonprofit assistance, water softening plant for those that are on the county's water softening, child care assistance, travel and tourism, et cetera. As usual, we have a continued low percentage of delinquencies, which goes back into that previous with DTAC. Our building permits are slightly down from the record year we had in 2021, but continue to be extremely strong. We'll have to review this in the fall, but it's the intention of staff to recommend that we put an additional $10 million into the infrastructure bank. Originally, we had done 7 years commitment for $7 million for 5 years, but in the last several years, we've been able to up that to 10. Assuming things hold true, that would be the recommendation going into 2023. And the rainy day fund is still intact. We do have to evaluate that each year because you're only allowed to put in 16.6% of your expenditures. So it's sitting at $12 million. We'll evaluate if that has to go up and down based off of that percentage. And then lastly, non-general is also before you, non-general fund, and that matches their anticipated receipts or it supports their appropriation request. So that's kind of a one-for-one, what comes in goes out.
What's going on with the recorder? The recorder's budget?
That was the, I think that they are adjusting because they they used a fund that they, as they worked with the auditor's office, realized
So
that they need
normally
to,
they're at 7-something, they went to 400 last year, and now they're back to
they
the
have to
normal.
adjust it back. Correct. So if there's not, we will meet in, I don't remember a specific day off the top of my head, it's on my calendar, but Tiff and I will go in front of the Budget Commission in August in this room, just like other jurisdictions do, and we'll give them this some information, assuming that you approve that here. And then we will work on your final budget towards the fall, and then you'll have the opportunity, as like usual, for us to bring those items in. If you would like to discuss anything with any department heads or other elected officials, we'll obviously ask them to come and have those presentations with you, but this is really just to get the process of the budget cycle started.
So the recommendations that you've mentioned, that we're not approving those, we're just approving the tax collections, the anticipated tax collections here for the baseline moving forward,
Correct.
just for those who are listening in. We're not
Yeah, there was-
approving any expenditure, we're just,
Yeah, no, it's just the baseline. It's really that opportunity to say to the state, this is what we anticipate, and this is why we have the millage on the books.
yep.
Do
Okay.
you want to read that out, or do you have it in their packet, and Tina didn't?
I have a resolution to approve the tax budget for tax year 2023.
So moved?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think the second part that we have here, and I'll probably kick it over to Tiff here in a second, is, like most employers, we're seeing the challenges in recruitment and retention of employees. We've had several discussions with the department heads under the BOCC. Actually, we are going to be putting kind of small working groups together amongst the directors under the BOCC. And we've had other conversation with elected officials as well to look at such items as salary, benefits, and things of that nature. And just wanted to kind of get some direction from you. And I think Tiff had some information that she wanted to share, so kind of kick it over to you.
Sure. So as Martin mentioned, we've had several discussions with your directors as well as a handful of elected officials who are all concerned about retention and recruiting employees, trying to take into account our current financial condition as well as the possibility of using ARPA dollars. I've run various models, anywhere from providing a base salary increase plus a lump sum to employees now, plus reviewing our compensation schedules, and that's in regard to, our compensation schedules are in regard to the employees that serve under the Board of County Commissioners. In the fall, that's another one of those working groups that Martin mentioned in relation to the compensation plan, our health insurance, as well as messaging concerning PERS and health insurance. So essentially, we've kind of landed on two models for the board's consideration, if they're so inclined. A lump sum model that would provide $2,500 lump sum. We'd most likely have to break it down into 2 or 3 lump sum payments to employees of the $2,500. That's a rough cost of just a little over $1 million to the general fund and close to $2 million for all funds that are appropriated under the Board of County Commissioners. I've also run various models, but kind of have landed on potentially a 2% increase for those that fall under the county commissioners. You could also provide that to other elected officials, plus a $2,400 retention lump sum at a cost of roughly $1.6 million to the county general fund and $2.9 million for all funds associated under the Board of County Commissioners. I have had some conversations with legal counsel for the unions, and the sheriff's office is getting ready to start negotiations in September, so we would most likely not do anything for the sheriff's office as we proceed through those negotiations. We don't want to muddy the waters in terms of that. So those are two of the models that I've run. As I mentioned, I've run various models from 2,400 lump sum down to 1% base plus 2,500. But those were kind of the two that we as staff landed on, and wondered if the county commissioners would like to entertain either of those two possibilities or give direction on modeling something different. I will mention, I think right now we're down 27 positions under the county commissioners. I looked in 2019, pre-pandemic, we only had 10 vacancies.
Yeah, this is honestly just a terrible position to be in, that in 16 years of going through these budgets, I'm very, very concerned about what's going on. And that's twofold. We have a job to do for the public. Our employees perform wonderfully and do a public service to the county residents. We are struggling not only to fill open jobs to serve the public, but to keep these employees, which means we have to do something, in, I think, our collective opinion, that we have to attack this on multiple fronts. Number one, it's an education process to the employees and explaining how great the health insurance at the county is, to explain how great the PERS program is to be a public employee. But yet, the reality is that doesn't always matter, because people are looking at, I can get an extra $1 an hour or $2, or in today's environment, $5 an hour more by going to blank employer versus this public employer or even another public entity. So we're put in this position where we have to, I hate to use the word catch up, but in some ways catch up, that we have to do this accelerated wage growth and one-time bonuses and things of that matter to try to address this to our employees, who we value a lot. But this is coming at a cost. And this is the most direct correlation of all these excuses and everything else that are out there of why is all this happening. Tiffany, you just used the word ARPA dollars. Can we use some of the ARPA dollars?
Yes,
Hey, that's great. We've got this kitty of federal dollars, $46 million that came in, that we've got cash to spend, right? That's what you're saying. We got some cash to spend that came from the federal government. That cash that's borrowed, that we didn't need, that now is going to be spent, is doing what? It's literally fueling this fire. We're spending these dollars to keep up with inflation, and the inflation is coming as a result of too many dollars chasing too few of goods and services. So essentially, we're participating in what's happening to our economy right now, but guess what? We have to, because we have to keep our employees around. This is just a terrible situation to be in, and I'm very concerned. Essentially, the tax budget over the last 6 years, we're up 22% in spending over that period of time. Even though we see a bunch of zeros and ones and 3% targeted growth, oh, that's not bad, it's not bad. It's 22%. So I know that's not our final budget, but it's just sad that we're in this position facing inflation that's as high as it's been in 40 years, and now the taxpayers of Warren County, through their local government, are going to feel, because we have to feel, these negative effects. And it's going to do nothing but get worse in this environment.
I would just say that, from my standpoint, I believe that our employees' salaries are very low. I think the 2% that we've asked them over the years to endure hasn't kept up with inflation long before the heightened inflation over the last couple of years. The county continues to, even when we weren't sure what was going to happen during the onset of the pandemic, experience very high collection rates and increase in revenues. And much like I believe that that property owners should benefit from that through a tax holiday, and those who utilize the water service from the county should benefit by, some of these opportunities. Also, our employees should benefit by that. I mean, that 2% raise that they've gotten year over year has essentially resulted in them losing buying power over a very long period of time. We as commissioners received a substantial raise from the General Assembly, and 5% one year, 5% the next year, with an automatic COLA of 1.75 for another, 5?
I think it's through 2027 or
years.
28.
I think that this is indeed the opportunity to show our employees how much we value them and do several things. I think if we do have one-time resources, it seems appropriate that if it's an eligible expenditure, to be able to provide some immediate relief to our employees through a bonus. I also think that we should, start to address the base pay that is woefully low. And I would be in favor of doing both of the things that you suggest. I would also be in favor of understanding our wage scale and as it compares to others in our area and similarly situated, and would be open to considering yet another adjustment as we go through the budget process moving forward. To me, our employees have done a lot, and they reflect the culture of the county commissioners that's been built up long before me, a very conservative and selfless servitude. But I can't continue to ask them to lose money, buying power year over year, because even when we have the resources, we're unwilling to address the fact that the raises aren't sufficient to keep up with inflation, when I myself was given a pretty substantial raise. And so from my 2 cents, I would be in support of doing a 2% base pay across the board increase, the bonus that you suggest, and would be open to considering additional base pay consistent with evaluating all of our salary bands during the next budget process. We have the resources to do it, and I think our employees should share in the success of the county, like we are trying to build up this broader community.
Okay, anything else?
Oh, I'd like to move on. I guess I'd make a motion that we provide a $2,500 bonus and a 2% raise.
Well, we're not acting on the budget, are we?
No, this would be outside of the budget. This would be as a current effort to retain our employees, as well as to recruit new employees. And just for clarification, the model that I talked about was a 2% base and $2,400 lump sum. Those were the numbers, as well as the
But weren't you
$2,500 lump
But
sum.
weren't you looking at the timing on doing that and how you spread those out? And
Yeah, so the lump sum, we discussed doing it either, half now and half in December.
But that's to be determined, right? I
Yes,
thought-
yes.
I'm trying to
But-
determine that.
Yes, that would be the
So
modeling.
I don't, until you settle in on exactly what that looks like, I don't want to act to say we're doing it.
Oh, no, I think I'm just looking for direction. Is that something that the commissioners are willing to entertain, and if so, what would be the pleasure of the board, either to provide guidance to Martin and myself so that we could paper it up for you. But those were just two things that we modeled currently that we're presenting as possible options to address the issues. Once again, the two that I presented today were just flat $2,500 lump sum amounts that would be broken up into possibly 2 or 3 payments to the current county employees, so that we potentially could use ARPA dollars as premium pay, because it does have some limitations and restrictions on how we do that for premium pay. And the other option that I presented, and once again, I can model any number now that I have the calculations in a spreadsheet. The other model was a 2% base salary increase and $2,400 lump sum amount for employees. Those were the two different ones and the cost associated with those, just as a refresher, it's a little over $1 million to the general fund. Total all in for those outside of with the general fund and non-general fund was almost $2 million.
I thought you said it was 1.6 to the general fund.
That is the 2% base and $2,400 lump sum. That would be 1.6 to the general fund, overall 2.9. And once again, remember, the sheriff's office is your largest department. These numbers do not include the sheriff's office as we are beginning negotiations in September. And I would anticipate, I have had conversations with the sheriff, I would anticipate a rather large request for salary increases during that negotiation.
So are the figures you've just spoken about including giving this to sheriff?
No, it is not.
Okay. And have you studied how we compare to other counties or jurisdictions for similar salaries and benefits?
We have piecemealed that, I would say, based upon our emergency situations. In the water department's been one of those that we've definitely had issues. I think we currently are down 10 or 11 people in the water department right now. But
That's
to
a part.
Commissioner Jones's request that we will start that total compensation review that will include comparisons to other counties. That is beginning in small work groups currently. We've also discussed potentially hiring a consultant. When the original plan was developed in 1986, a consultant was hired to
Factor and different.
to factor positions and look at all of those. We've kind of updated it, but not to the degree it probably needs to be in order to be competitive in the current market. We've also discussed potentially, do we hire a recruiter to assist us in trying to find employees for some of these specialized positions that we have in water and sewer or 911. We've discussed the possibility of that. So we have tried to take a holistic look at where we're at, where we need to go, and how do we keep the employees that we have right now.
And conversations about moving towards the final budget in the fall. I mean, we had the conversation with directors on Wednesday that we're going to spend the next 3 to 4 months doing a lot of those things. I mean, to Tiff's point is we've got some specificity to certain jobs that have come open now where we've had that survey, but to do a holistic approach, there's going to be a significant amount of your directors that are going to work with Sue. Sue's going to be on that subgroup, for lack of a better phrase, to study not only who we're competing with in the public sector, which obviously is other counties around us, but those in the public sector, cities, townships, and then also looking, because I think really what we are faced with here from a recruitment perspective and retention as well is depending on the age of the employee, they will pop in between the public and the private sector. If they're a little bit longer, they'll then do more in the public sector. So we have to look at all angles when it comes to that. And then I think something that Commissioner Young alluded to, so we're kind of, and actually it's gathering on my email system now, I've asked directors to which group they want to be in. That is the salary survey group. The second group is really that health and benefits. The PERS is really making sure, again, where we stand with other communities around here. How does that compare? I've had initial conversations with Haran relative to how do we compare to other public, but also to the private sector. How we need to educate. Are there things that we think we might be really good on, but we need to maybe phrase it a little bit different, or maybe we're mistaken on that. So we're really trying to tackle those two things significantly so that when we come in the fall, we have it in front of you, whether that's seeking outside help or doing it internally ourselves.
How can you advise us with regard to what kind of bonus payment or what kind of increase we
I
might
think what we-
authorize without knowing how we compare to other jurisdictions which we're in direct competition with?
Well, I think from a bonus perspective, what we looked at that is we went out and actually researched from Moody's, who talked about what an average family was seen expense-wise costing them per month, and it was roughly between $400 and $450 a month additional, ranging from the gas to staples that they would need to put on their table and things of that nature. So we looked at that, knowing that if we started something either mid-July to August, we had roughly 6 months that we would need that. So that's where we fell on that 2,400 to 2,500.
So the bonus issue really is not something where we're comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions, is we're taking a look at how our employees have been hurt by inflation and their increased costs, and trying to give them something based upon the fact that we've got the money, based upon the fact that our revenues have been strong. And of course, we have had a historically very strong county flow debt and all of that. So it seems to me that that's a different analysis than looking at base rate pay and things like that, which we're more interested in comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions.
Well, and I think that's, I don't want to speak for TIF. I think that's why TIF ran a couple different models, and what we're seeking from the board today is direction as to what we could bring forward hypothetically next week, if it's a bonus scenario and bonus scenario only is a combination.
Because we're dealing with two things. We're dealing with inflation that's affecting these. And I actually take offense to the fact that this board's not kept up with inflation. Inflation historically has run at 1%, 2%, and we've historically given 1%, 2%. We've given lump sums in the past, so I fundamentally disagree that we've
Well, I've
not
got the
taken it.
numbers right
So-
here that I asked to be run. I mean,
Well, that's fine, you can
I'm
give them
only
whatever
look-
you want, but
I'm only
I'm
look-
just saying that I don't think that because our turnover rates or anything like that have not been too
Listen,
high.
I'm just looking at the numbers. So in looking at all of the different categories, and I wanted to look at it in comparison to the increase that I got in the same period of time when I've been here compared to our employees.
Oh, I think we're overpaid.
And-
I think we're
And so
stupidly overpaid.
So in looking just at the different salary bands, on average salaries in those bands, in every year that I've been here, 17, 18, 19, you could stop there, look at 20, but not even taking into consideration 21 or 22, all of our employees are in the red in every single category. So we're barely, those increases aren't keeping up with inflation. And I think that's the problem. Now, we are a conservative county. Our wages reflect that. I'm not saying to throw that principle out the door. But what I am saying is, we ought to, when times are good, we ought to take these sorts of things into consideration. And if we consider the buying power moving out to 21 and 22, our employees, their ability to purchase is dropped dramatically. And so I'm only looking at when I've been here. I've been responsible for the budget too. I've been responsible for the rate increases too. So this is not this is just looking at the numbers. There, we aren't keeping up with inflation. Before the historic increase in inflation, that's clearly impacting our ability to fully staff the organization, that ultimately then impacts the kinds of services that the taxpayer gets for their money. And I think our employees have done an unbelievable job continuing to maintain a high level of services, notwithstanding the challenges. But this is something that I think we have to consider if we value, and I believe we do, our longstanding employees.
I think the one-time bonus that we've done, what, 2 times?
Well, yeah, and so I do think that we got kind of behind in 2000 and going back to 2010, where we did 0% increases, then we did lump sum base increases, so that didn't, it didn't compound. So we got behind coming out of that last kind of recession, and then most recently, CPI in 2021 was 4.7%, and we gave 2. So we were kind of behind, and then we got a little bit further behind when we only did 2 versus the 4. And then this year, we did give 3 at the beginning of the year, and obviously everyone
And this
knows
is why,
that CPI is 8%. So
Maybe-
that's how we
maybe
got
fundamentally,
behind.
I just think differently, that during 2008 and 9, when I was here, and how many layoffs did we have, Tiffany?
We had 0.
Okay, so when we talk about, we didn't give enough of a raise,
Well, I don't think,
let's,
I
so
don't
if you're
think
going back
that's
to
the
that,
issue.
it is the issue, that's what you're
It's
you're
not.
bringing up in
no,
your
it's that
baseline.
we've never caught up to that. So it's one thing for us in a recession, which I think is laudable, that we didn't have to lay people off, that
All right, well, it sounds like,
everyone was
I don't want,
conservative.
you guys are going back 10 years and
Oh,
talking
no, I was
about-
just trying to explain
But
how
you
I
are.
think we got behind.
Who says we're behind? Okay.
Only in
I'm-
regard to what she said in terms of the CPI
Okay, I
and.
fundamentally, I stand by our budget. I'll put our budget by anybody. I'm proud of the fact I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm proud of the fact we've had what we've had in the budget. I'm proud of the fact that our turnover has been incredibly low in this county. And again, that's the number one thing, is the free market. If we're underpaying our employees, guess what happens? They leave. That is what a free market economy does. And right now, I'm the one that was jumping up to you, Tiffany, saying, we need to do something immediately. We have to do something because this inflation is out of control.
That's
Our
correct.
inflation is way behind, and the free market's saying we're not filling the job. So how many times have I told you to? I don't care what the wage base is. We have to fill these jobs right now
Yes.
that are critical to public service.
And we can't lose anymore.
And we can't lose them.
Yeah,
I've been saying that because that's the environment we're in here.
right.
But so if we're going back and talking about what we did in 2010, that seems ridiculous to me.
I
That
don't-
I'm
I don't
talking
think
about
anybody's
what we're
talking about-
doing right now, that I'm 100% behind. I think it was my idea
And
to
that-
talk about a lump sum.
And that was why I brought forward the 2
And I
potential
support that.
scenarios. Is
I
the
support the
$2,500
lump sum. I also support addressing the base wages to ensure that what we were paying in whether it's 2017 or 2010 means the same amount. That's what I'm saying. And so I think it's both and. I don't think it makes me less conservative because I want our employees to get a wage that can buy the same stuff that they were buying in 2010 or 2017 or 2020. All I'm saying is we need to be prudent with it, but that we have the resources. We didn't perhaps in 2010. That's why there was no increase. We have it now. We ought to really consider the opportunity for our employees to benefit from the economic growth that we're trying to build, all together trying to build here.
So there's 2 things. Number 1 is the lump sum catch-up. Number 2 is addressing unfilled jobs right now. I think I've even said, I don't care about a 2% increase if we have to increase those substantially. I think I've directed both of you from my perspective.
And
to
we
go-
have taken that
to
action.
go fill. I don't care about a
Yes.
2% increase if we have to fill a position that's going unfilled because the free market says this wage isn't working guess what we have to do? We have to meet the market. I
Right,
don't care
but
if
I
that is a
also think
2%.
our existing employees who are doing those jobs should benefit too. It shouldn't just be used as a recruitment tool for new employees coming in. Those who've been here with us
I'm
should
not
benefit by
arguing that
that.
at all, because we have talked
But
about
that's
this.
why I think that's why I think we have to consider, in addition to any sort of additional pay
I'm
that
not
we
arguing
do,
that.
a base
all.
rate increase.
Okay, well,
So,
So
So
we're
if I-
just looking for direction.
yeah,
So,
I'm-
I guess what
let
I-
me- Let me think,
no, I mean, I guess what I'm,
can I make a few comments?
yeah, no, feel free, please, I'm willing to interrupt you.
All right. First off, every year when we budget and we do increases for salary, we've accepted the recommendations of our staff. We've looked at all of the factors relating to that, and we've acted accordingly. Now, we're in a special period of high inflation that's adversely affected our employees. We have the ability to make a bonus payment to them, which I think all three commissioners concur with. And I don't think that we've had any disagreement. Dave is in favor and has proposed this. We all met with you, we did, each of us individually, and discussed that and looked at what was necessary. And I think that you're hearing from all of us today is that we agree with making a bonus payment to help our employees to cover the costs of the current economic condition that we're faced with and that they're faced with. So I think that's number one. Number two, there's the question of a salary level increase that is looking at a more generic question of making us more attractive or comparable to other jurisdictions that we're competing with for employees and to retain employees that we currently have and to recruit new employees. And I think that making that decision, my opinion, should be based upon you giving us some data with regard to how we actually compare. But I think that we can move forward with, and I'm in favor of moving forward with, a one-time bonus to help our current employees with the current economic situation.
But the 2%, is that intra-budget? You're saying starting immediately on the 2%?
Yes, I mean, that was just one model, is immediately the 2% plus the lump sum bonus. And to your point about we have to pay what we have to pay because of the free market to fill some of these positions.
Sorry,
So-
can you say that again? My apologies.
I don't even know why this watch.
So for example, if we say we have to fill these positions and we have to pay 5% above what we would normally pay, then you have the trickle down effect to all the employees that are in that particular category. What I'm saying is potentially if we go right now bump all of those up by 2%, it may help you retain and it will take out the potential for, okay, I'm gonna segregate this group because we have a high vacancy rate, and I'm gonna give everybody there 5%, because then what happens is you start poaching from different departments, which is what we've seen recently.
Right, intra-government
Exactly.
changes.
Yeah, within the county. I mean, it's happening right now.
Well, I'll go back to my original comments. This is gonna cost us a lot of money. If it costs us 1.6 million all in to do this right now, we have almost triple the amount of unfilled positions that we normally have.
Yes.
We have, I think we did a survey, and there's a significant number of employees that are looking right now to leave employment here, which is not good. We have the situation where we are down a number of employees. And that's where my focus has been, that there are certain things that are mission critical, that we can't have those jobs unfilled. And no matter what we think they ought to be paid, we need to go to the market and find those positions. But I agree, and a realist, and understand that that means, wait a second, they're doing the same job, and now all of a sudden you're paying them $4 more an hour. Now they're brand new and they're making as much as me. And then what happens there? And then that person starts looking. So this is what I mean. This sucks. Inflation is terrible, and it's not our fault. And we have managed this very well in a very prudent manner, these taxpayer dollars, and it's all worked for a long period of time. This is this crazy extraneous stuff that's coming in through no fault of ours, and now we're contributing to it, and we have to contribute to it, because again, as I said during my comments, we value our employees. We understand what they're going through. Most of them have been here for a very long time. We understand that, and through no fault of theirs, they're going to Kroger and stuff might not even be there, or they're paying, 8% right now more than they were paying last year.
Well, and that's why we did when Commissioner Grossman asked why we came up with that $2,500, it was really, and I had said, Tiff, is I wanted that to be able to be scientific, that somebody reputable like Moody's said, the average family, obviously we can't tell if someone's a single, if they have a lot of kids, but the average family is spending about $400 to $450 more for the things that you just said. So that's why we locked in on that $2,500.
Yeah, and I apologize that I didn't provide you the background with that number, and I appreciate Martin reminding me.
Because we just, we wanted to make sure it wasn't just something that was picked out of thin air.
Correct.
Well, I think you've got at least direction from the board to move forward with doing something, lay us out an exact plan of exactly what it looks like from the payment standpoint.
Okay.
That this 2% we are saying will kick in blank, and we're gonna do the lump sum of blank here, and just give us some definitive, and we can act on that shortly.
Okay, we can do that.
It's okay, Chip.
That's reasonable.
Okay, very good.
Okay, we can do that.
Thank you.
All right, now we have an executive session motion.
I'm going to recommend that you also include in that, should you need to discuss a motion to conference with your attorney for 2 separate pending litigations.
There's 3.
Oh, 3. Adam has 2. Isn't he special?
No, the one's not.
And then add to that the imminent litigation.
Yes.
So I move that we go into executive session to discuss with our attorney present 3 pending litigations, including an imminent litigation.
3 pending and 1 imminent
3
litigation.
pending litigations and 1 imminent litigation.
By imminent, it's being threatened, is that right?
Yes. Has been threatened, yes.
Right, okay. Call roll?
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.